And lastly, Solomon talks about the productive nature of wisdom. And he says, drink water from your own cistern. Stay home. Be happy where you are. And running water from your own well. Should your fountains be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets, let them be your own and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth as a loving deer and a graceful doe. Let her breast satisfy you at all times and always be enraptured with her love. For why should you, my son, be enraptured by an immoral woman and be embraced in the arms of a seductress? Solomon reminds his son and us that God had provided a spouse to quench those physical needs that you have. Instead of neglecting what God has given, we must renew our gratitude and focus upon what God has blessed. Stop deluding yourself that you can do better. Don't entertain that thought. And who said you're that great? Right? People say, I can do better. You know what? You can't. I know you. What you got is really good. The fact that anybody would ever look at you and say, oh, that's the miracle here. A friend of mine was tempted by an infatuation at work years ago. And it was a young woman. She was young. She was beautiful. She flattered him. She joked with him. The attraction was mutual, right? And at first it was joking and flirting, but it was moving towards something different. And one Saturday morning, he's in the office alone. Nobody would go in on Saturdays. And she comes in. She saw that his car was there, and she comes in. And they're joking and laughing and fooling around. And finally, it hits him. And he says, you know what? I'm not what you're looking for. I'm married, and my wife is pregnant. And what kind of a guy would I be if I were to go with you? Not the kind of guy you want, and it's not the kind of person you deserve. And that was it. That was the end of it. And in that decision, he secured his honor, his reputation, and his witness. And she maintained his dignity. Because unbeknownst to him, everybody in the office was watching. Everybody knew what he was doing, what they were doing, and they were waiting for him to fall. They wanted it. His credibility as a Christian was preserved. In fact, his credibility was then strengthened. You see, character is not defined by what we say we're going to do or what we believe we should do. Character is defined by actually what we do. Not someone who acts like those bighorn sheep, right? Bighorn sheep doesn't have a conscience. He doesn't have a plan. He's guided by his appetite. And so he is a beast. He has no option. We have an option. We are not a beast. I am not an animal. And resistance is so much easier when you decide ahead of time who you're going to be. What is your character? Be very, very clear on what your character is and what you're going to stand for. Solomon warns not to let your desire spill outside the marriage covenant. Drink water from your own cistern, he says, and running water from your own well. Should your fountains be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets, be satisfied within the confines of your own marriage covenant. The marriage covenant. In Genesis chapter 2, it is defined that for a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That's the essence of it right there. The perfect mystical symmetry of two people becoming one. And when that purity of the covenant is ruptured, the absolute purity of it is gone. And the relationship now becomes asymmetric. It's uneven. That means it's not balanced, but it can continue. But it continues with a limp. The absolute purity of that marriage has been taken away, but it can continue with a limp. And God, for those who decide to continue, God will bless it. See, the wound is permanent, but the repercussions do not have to be eternal. There can be restitution. 1 John chapter 1, it says, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and righteous so that he will forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And now, one is called to forgive. And that is where God works in a supernatural way. So he finds someone with unnatural character and builds them up. It's extraordinary. When you see that, it's extraordinary. I know people like that who have limped their way through, and in their hearts, they make that decision, I will fulfill my end of the covenant. And God blesses that in just an extraordinary way. See, God honors the vigilance to stay in the marriage and the willingness to forgive. We are commanded to forgive. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. It's supernatural. So easy to talk about, right? It's so easy to say, oh, you should forgive, until I do something to you. It's difficult to live out, but that's the productive nature of wisdom, that you decide ahead of time, no matter what, I am going to fulfill my covenant. And finally, Solomon closes out with a sobering warning. The ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all his paths. His own iniquities entrap the wicked man, and he's caught in the cords of his sin. He shall die for lack of instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he shall go astray. Nothing is done in secrecy, right? Nobody may find out. Maybe nobody will know, but nothing is done in secrecy. Nothing! Yes! Psalm 73, it says, the evil mind convinces itself that God's not watching. He's not watching. The old man, he's too busy. And they say, how can God know? Is there knowledge in the Most High? But his own iniquities trap him, and he's caught in the cords of his sin, and you can't move about freely when your legs are tied. God knows. And in the greatness of his folly, it says he shall go astray and die. Boy, don't go that way. Sin campaign's one thing. Had you known the whole story, some people still make that decision, but if you know the whole story, because God is slow to discipline, is interpreted as God doesn't care. He's an absentee parent. But that punishment does not have to be certain. Because there is always forgiveness at the foot of the cross. No matter what, there is always forgiveness at the foot of the cross. And God can restore